Good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to 10 Ways to Frustrate Attackers in 2023. Woo! My name is Justin Palk. I'm a senior security consultant with Red Siege Information Security. I'm a pen tester. I do some tool development for us. I play in CTFs, not as much as I used to. I had sort of a weird course getting to where I am today. I used to be a research scientist. I used to be a local government reporter and a security auditor before getting into pen testing. And every now and again, I brew mead and write a bit of cosmic horror. So yay Cthulhu. All right. So I've got a very simple goal for this talk today. And my goal is to help you make my life miserable. I am something of a professional masochist at this point. Don't get me wrong, I love getting into people's networks. I love getting at all that lovely, crunchy PII and sensitive business data and everything. I love getting domain admin. That said, I really like it when I can't do a damn thing. I like getting into a network and finding that I am blocked every which way. So what I want to do is I want to help you make my life suck. There's two big ways to do that we're going to talk about today. The first way is I'm going to tell you the 5 things that me and my coworkers found a lot last year that made things really easy for us. The easy wins, the things that let us go right to domain admin, you know, all the things that made things simple. I'm going to show you how to find them, you know, make recommendations about how to fix them, and do it before you get a pen test so you don't have to pay us to find them for you, because there's really no reason for that. The other thing is, the second part is going to be, you know, implement the controls that leave me feeling like I'm a mime stuck in a glass box. These are a little harder to do, sometimes a lot harder to do. They're often architectural. They take a lot more planning and execution, but when you do them, they really work well. So part 1 is no easy buttons. Right now, the easiest of easy buttons for us is ADCS misconfigurations, Active Directory Certificate Services. So these issues really came to light in summer of 21. Will Schroeder and Lee Christensen at SpecterOps published a paper called Certified Pre-Owned that basically walked through all the ways that people can abuse ADCS misconfigurations to privask, to gain persistence in a domain, and do other things, you know, all the things you can do with certificates. I'm also one note I'm gonna make is, these slides are already up online. There are links on the first and last slides, and they'll have notes and, you know, all the URLs, so you can go and pull them down after we're done. So how do I find these when I'm in your network? I like to use a tool called Certify, and it's real simple. I just need a regular domain user account. I run Certify, and it will query the domain controller. It'll find all the CAs, it'll query all the templates, and then it will analyze them and say, here's what you need to do to exploit these. Here are all the vulnerable templates that are going to make it easy to attack this domain. So what I'm showing here is an example of ESC1, one of the particular attacks. So you see, you know, bullet 1, enrollment rights, domain users. So anybody can enroll in a certificate using this template. Number 2, client authentication. The certificate you get can be used to log into something else. Problem is really number 3 there, enrollee supplies subject. What that means is I can go as, you know, regular domain user, request a certificate, but I can stick an alternate name on there, and I can make that alternate name any other user I want, including a domain admin. And then I can take that certificate that I just got, and I can take it to a domain controller and say, hi, I'm the domain admin, let me in. Now, if I want to be lower and quiet, I can, you know, make that a database admin, or, you know, somebody in the legal department, you know, get the specific thing that I want. But I can be anybody I want with this. And finding and exploiting this takes about 10 minutes. So there's, I think, a total of like 9 or 10 ESCs, the various attack vectors for this right now. Some of the other key ones, you've got ESC3, but instead of requesting a certificate with an alternate name, you're specifically enrolling on behalf of another user. ESC4, it's not a weakness in the template itself, it's a permissions problem where a low privileged user can modify the template or even modify the certificate authority itself and change it into an ESC1 template or one of these other issues. And then ESC8 is, we've left web requests on for this, and we can NTLM relay credentials to this ADCS endpoint and request a certificate on behalf of whoever's credentials we're relaying. How do you fix it? Step 1, remove any unnecessary templates. If you're not using it, just get rid of it. That's a good general rule. Number 2, make sure your low privileged users do not have write permissions on CAs or templates. This is critical infrastructure in your network. Low privileged users should not be able to modify these things. Number 3, if you need low privileged users to be able to request certificates, that's fine. There's another setting you can turn on that says, oh, by the way, a third party has to sign off on this. And if that third party is paying even a modicum of attention, that will cut off most of this because you can't do it silently anymore. And the last one, disable HTTP, HTTPS enrollment, again, if you're not using it. All right, next one, dangerous Active Directory permissions. This is where you've got a low privileged user, or more likely, again, probably all domain users, who have some sort of control over a domain object, like a group, maybe a key computer, maybe a GPO, that they can manipulate to move laterally or escalate privileges. Old GPOs that have been lingering in Active Directory for years or potentially decades are really susceptible to this. So how do I find it when I'm in your network? Bloodhound. Bloodhound is a tool that uses graph theory to identify exploitable relationships in Active Directory, and it will literally draw you a map how to get from this thing that I own to this other thing that I want. Use a tool, which I'm showing you here, Sharphound, to actually gather the data out of Active Directory. And then once you've got it and you feed it into Bloodhound, you get something that looks like this. This is a snippet of a Bloodhound graph. This is replicating something I actually encountered in a client network a few months ago, where I had some low-privileged user who's obviously a member of domain users. They had generic write on this GPO that was linked at the domain level. And I have to say, the client I was working with on this one was great. They really wanted a demonstration of impact, so we talked through a few things. They had me deploy a scheduled task that caused every computer that this GPO was applied to just call back to me with the username it was running as and the host name and a couple other bits of data. After about 45 minutes, when I'd gotten callbacks from 150 machines in the domain and their SIM was apparently screaming with alerts, they said, okay, please cut it off, we're done. But I really appreciated that. That was a lot of fun. But that GPO was literally old enough to drink. It was like 23 years old. And no one that they were able to get a hold of quickly even knew what it was doing there anymore. So it had been created, they'd grown out of it, but they'd never killed it. Okay, so how do you fix it? This is just, it's an Active Directory audit. You find it using Bloodhound's built-in queries. They've got a whole section that's just labeled dangerous privileges. That'll find all sorts of stuff like this. And then, anything that comes up in there, figure out how to break that chain. Make sure that only your necessary users and groups have write permissions on key Active Directory objects and user groups, and audit your group memberships. I should have said this up front, but nothing I'm saying here is going to be new. The whole point of this is what is working for us right now. So this stuff is pretty classic. For example, weak and reused passwords. We get into a network, we start password spraying, these are the first three things we're going to guess. Season and year, organization name and year, and password, because we still find it. I think I last found it about 2 months ago. And the thing is, a lot of these, they'll meet complexity requirements, basic complexity requirements, uppercase, lowercase, digits, special characters. But the thing is, the basic pattern itself is weak and something that we can exploit. Now, the other place you will get hung up on this is if you have passwords where maybe you've got stronger requirements, but you've got accounts that are set to never require a password change. And so this password has been lingering in this environment for years. This happens a lot with service accounts because people are understandably loath to touch those because they're, the longer it's been there, the less certain they are about what's going to break if they try and change it. So, that's going to be part of what we're looking at here. All right, how do we find these? So if I go into your network, I'm going to be starting with password spraying. It's an okay option, but I'm going to give you something better in a minute. You can use a tool called Kerberoot. It does Kerberos pre-authentication, password checking. Normally, if you're doing password sprays, the regular way, you're going to generate a 4625 Windows event. Kerberoot will give you something else. It'll give you that 4771. This is more of a SOC thing. People are often looking for the 4625. They'll miss the 4771. So from my perspective, it's quieter. It's also a bit faster. That said, as a technique overall, spraying is slow. You've got to be careful that you're not doing password sprays too often. Otherwise, you're going to end up locking out accounts, and that will make people unhappy. Also, you can't test a lot of passwords at once. That's the whole point with a spray. It's better if you can just check them all offline at once. Do an actual password audit. Dump ntds.dit from your domain controller, and then feed it into a password cracker using common word lists and see what you can get. This does require a computer with a GPU, but this doesn't mean you need anything fancy. We use the GPUs. I mean, they're good graphics cards, but they're the GPUs in our laptops. We don't have a cracking rig with 30 or 40 GPUs that we're using, and we're still cracking passwords. We do this partially to show people how low the barrier to entry for this is. This is not something, this is not rocket science, it's not magic. You can do it with a decent gaming laptop. So the tool that I use to dump ntds.dit is called secrets dump. It's part of the Impacket package of tools, and it'll give you a nice file you can feed right into Hashcat for cracking. So here you see, this is me running secrets dump in my domain. The ones on the right, those are the NTLM hashes. Those are the real password hashes in my test lab. Secrets dump will also give you the LM hashes, which you see on the left there, all those AAD, 3B4, etc. If you do this and you see anything other than that one hash repeated again and again and again on the left, that's a problem because those functionally are not encrypted anymore. It is trivial to break all of those. So anything that's still encrypted, LM style, you need to clean up and get rid of. That should not be on a modern network. You take that output from secret dump, you feed it into Hashcat, and Hashcat, it does what it says on the label. It cracks all the hashes. It's a highly optimized password cracker, runs very well on a laptop with a decent GPU. If you want to dump money into a cracking rig, you can totally do that too. The other part of this is you need word lists. Word lists of common passwords you can get from crackstation.org or weakpass.com. Weakpass.com also has a nice tool where you can give it terms and it will spit back a list of passwords based on those. So give it the name of your company, give it the name of key organizations, key units in your company, sports teams, other notable things about your area, and it will generate permutations based on all those that you can feed in here and try those against your password list. One other thing you can do short of a full password audit is you got that Bloodhound data earlier to look for bad AD issues. You'll also get in there the last time every account changed their password. Won't catch anything, but everything it does catch is probably worth looking at. This goes back to, again, things lingering for years or decades. If somebody's password is so old it's old enough to drive, that's a problem. If it's old enough to drink, that's really a problem. In the notes, there's a link to a script we've got up in GitHub that will dump that password data into a nice CSV for you that you can take a look at and find the really old passwords in your environment. How do you fix it? Update your password policy to modern standards. That means at least 15 characters, ideally passphrases. No periodic changes, though. Current guidance says you don't regularly change your password because all that does is it makes your users want to come up with something where they can keep 14 characters the same and only change the last one. And that's all they really need to remember. You only change your password if you've got a reason to think that it's been compromised, if there's been a breach, something else looks wrong, then you make somebody change their password. Group managed service accounts for service account passwords. Lapse has been around for a while for local admin accounts on Windows boxes, and I think they just made some updates this past week to make it even easier to use. And then Azure AD password protection. Even if you're still on-prem, you can get Azure AD password protection, sync it up with your local AD, and you can give it, sort of like I was showing you on the weakpass.com, you can give it those lists of words and say, hey, block anything based on permutations of these. We just don't want these passwords in our environment. Sensitive data in shared files. Our principal consultant refers to this part of our job as either file or network archaeology. We get into the network, we start looking for open shares, and we just start seeing what we've got. Web.config files, PowerShell scripts, AWS config files with keys in them, files for cloud infrastructure that you're testing out locally and then pushing out to the cloud or on a developer laptop, virtual hard drive images, and the ever-popular passwords.txt, passwords.doc, passwords.xls. Those are often a great way for us to get privilege escalation and lateral movement in an environment. But sometimes we don't even need those to get what we're looking for. I have found, organizations' disaster recovery plans. I have found sensitive HR and legal docs sitting on open shares. It's great when legal has their entire file share just sitting open so that anybody in the company can get at it, especially when they've got settlement docs and contract negotiation stuff in there. Plenty of customer and employee PII, database backups. Another good one is scans from virtual fax machines and from printers that are just, it scans to disk somewhere, it sends somebody a copy, but it never deletes the copy it made. I love finding those. How do I find them? I like to use SMB map. I think this one's nice because it doesn't just say, hey, there's this open share out there. I can also tell it to enumerate all the directories and files in there. And so then I can go through and dump that and then say, okay, find all the things with password in the title. But this particular one, there's lots of tools that can do this. In addition to SMB map, there's crack map exec, there's EDD, SharpView and PowerView have modules that'll do this or will let you search for specific terms in file names on open shares. There's lots of ways to do this. And again, you get a low privileged user, you run one of these tools, you take a look at the output, and then you start going and locking things down. Other fixes for this, educate your staff on secure data storage practices. Educate your developers and admins on how to securely handle credentials in scripts and source code. I know that I think Kat over there hit on this in her talk an hour or so ago. I love finding config files. I love finding PowerShell scripts. But sometimes you'll also get things like, somebody will store a PowerShell secure string in the same folder as the key necessary to decrypt it. So, At a sort of a lower level, don't let users share things off their local hard drives. They really just shouldn't be doing that. Don't be sharing things off your workstation or your laptop. And then, like I said, audit your shares to make sure your users can only access things that they actually need to for their work, for business purposes. This one's a little more esoteric. Users joining computers to the domain. MSDS machine account quota. That is the value in Active Directory that says how many computers that random domain user is allowed to join to the network with no admin privileges. It's just something you're allowed to do. By default, this is 10. The problem with this, beyond just cluttering up your inventory, is that computers joined in this manner get put in they don't get put into an OU like workstations or laptops or something. They just get dumped in the computers folder. GPOs are not typically applied to the computers folder. So anything that gets added to the computers folder is now domain joined, but does not have any of the restrictions that would normally be applied to it by GPO applied. So this means that I, as an attacker, if I can actually join a real computer to the network, I get all the advantages of domain membership and none of the penalties. If I can't actually join an actual computer, if all I can do is create a computer object, what I can still do is I can still leverage that to do something like resource-based constrained delegation or resource-based unconstrained delegation and take advantage of that for privilege escalation. It's a stepping stone to something else, but it's useful when I can do it. It's really easy to find this if you've got something like AD Explorer. I've also got a Sharp View command in the notes if you pull down the slides from the network. But you search for MSDS machine account quota, and the value pops right up there. And that is the default, that all domains have unless you have changed it. This one's really easy to fix. You set that value to 0, and it's done. I don't know that I've found a network yet where this was necessary. I mean, obviously, check with your admins, do some testing, but this should be a real easy one to fix. All right. Part 2, speed bumps, roadblocks, and rough terrain. These are the ones that, there's not a vulnerability. This is hardening your network against me. I will say these are not cure-alls, these are not panaceas, these are obstacles, not force fields. Given time and effort, an attacker can still find a way around them, and you do need to make sure you do them properly. These are harder to do than addressing the things that I just pointed out a minute ago, because again, a lot of these are sort of architectural. They will require you to change the way your network works, the way things talk to each other, the way you manage things. As a result, I'm not generally going to be making specific recommendations on tools, with a couple of exceptions, and how you go about doing this is going to vary from organization to organization. All right, so the first one is application allow listing. Basically, profile your machines, figure out what users are actually running or should be running, and don't let them run anything else. Microsoft gives you 2 tools for doing this. There is Windows Defender Application Control, WDAC, and AppLocker. AppLocker is the older tool. Microsoft has stopped making updates to it and is really pushing everyone towards WDAC. Either one will work, but obviously, I'd go with WDAC because it's going to be supported going forward. We've got here is an example of me trying to use cscript, which is a built-in Microsoft tool, to run a payload in a Visual Basic file, and cscript.exe failed to run. This program is blocked by group policy. I ran into this a few months ago, and some of my coworkers have run into it too, and it made it so hard to just get that initial foothold on a client machine, and we eventually had to ask them to turn it off because between EDR, they had a good EDR config, but EDR plus this, we just didn't have many options, if any, for running a payload. We beat our head against it for quite a while before we asked them to dial it back so we could do the rest of the test. And the nice thing about this is this can even block Microsoft signed binaries that we will use to bypass some EDR things. So things like cscript, wscript, install util, ms build, you can cut all those off. Administrator account separation. I both love and hate this graph. I love it because the client's doing something right. I hate it because it's going to make things suck for me. You've got your workstation admins in a separate group from your server admins, in a separate group from your domain admins, and with the exception of that one IT consultant hanging out over there on the far left, you don't have any basic domain user accounts in any of those groups. This just does a great job of containing any particular credential compromise. Even if I get one of those workstation admins, that doesn't get me onto a server or onto a domain controller. Even the server admin doesn't get me a domain controller. It's just adding steps for what I have to do to try and get to the DC or anything else. Even if I'm just trying to stay at the server level, that's still an additional hop that I'm going to have to make, an additional place I'm going to have to find a credential to compromise. Nothing's going to get me everything. NetSeg. Can't get there from here. Yeah, just figure out what on your network should be able to talk to anything else. Why is your OT accessible from a regular user workstation if you've got OT in your environment? Why are your regular users able to access development servers? Why don't you have it set up so that only developers can get to those servers over there that are probably loaded down with misconfigurations, probably have credentials sitting on them, and I can totally pivot out to those, privesc, and then pivot back into the regular network if I can get to them. Don't let me get to them. This is probably the hardest one to implement, again, because this is a major architectural issue. You really got to do some traffic analysis to figure out what's talking to what. But it really pays off when you can do it. This one's a little easier, restrict SMB. This goes back to the open file shares. Don't let your workstations talk to each other. They probably don't need to. This will also, again, stop people from sharing stuff off of their workstations, which is almost always a bad idea. You can just do this with the built-in host-based firewall that comes on every Windows box. This one's pretty easy. And I've yet to see a network where this was really, letting user workstations talk to each other. So rarely is it actually necessary. So you did a password audit. You've gotten rid of all your weak passwords. The next step after that is privileged password management. Get yourself a password vault. Ideally set it up so that things have to be checked out, and then after they get checked back in, they get rotated. Even if somebody copies down a password and sticks it in a text file on their desktop, by the time I find it, it's already invalid. It's not going to get me anything. This is a great one when you can do it, although you have to make sure then you protect the password vault. I've not personally tested, but I have seen environments where they didn't protect the password vault, somebody got control of it, and it was game over at that point. But this was a good one. I said at the beginning this was 10 ways to frustrate attackers. I lied a little bit. There is a bonus 11th, canary tokens. These are just fun. And they're so easy to do. This can be as simple as adding an account to your Active Directory, make it look like a regular user account, give it a ridiculously long password that will never get cracked, and then don't tell anybody about it. And as soon as someone comes in and starts password spraying, as soon as you see a login attempt against that account, you know something's wrong. If you're going to have file shares, you're going to need them. Stick a file named passwords.txt in, some 6-folder deep directory, and just leave it there. And have auditing set on it so that if anything actually opens that, it fires off an alert. And the great thing about these is, as an attacker, there is literally nothing I can do about this. All this does is slow me down because I have to second guess everything I'm doing because I'm not going to know that that account, that canary account even exists until I've dumped something that's touched it and set off an alert. I'm not going to know, or I'm going to have to think very carefully about whether that passwords.txt file or companysalaries.xlsx file is wow, it couldn't be that easy. That's too good to be true, isn't it? But I have to look, and now I'm screwed. And like I said, these are really easy to implement. So, all right. And that is it. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, sir.
You said that there's a URL for this presentation?
Yes. And it was, let me jump to the beginning. Whee! Boink. redsiege.com/frustrate. The slides are already up there. I've already checked for them. Oh, got a question back there? Mm-hmm. Sorry, I can't quite hear you. Sort of. They're related. It's something out there that is, attractive, that an attacker is going to intentionally or unintentionally go after, that, it's only there to provide an opportunity for defenders to detect them. So, yeah, they're related concepts. Other questions? Oh, right here in front.
I've got to ask, with the lack of password rotation, isn't that based on assumption that MFA is in place?
Not necessarily. I mean, don't get me wrong. MFA is awesome, but it's more a matter of frequent password rotations. Encourage people to pick bad passwords. Yeah. So at the very least, once a year if you really have to, but figure out what makes sense for your environment. Don't just blindly say 90 days or 180 days or something. Really put some thought into it and pick a policy that makes sense. So. Yeah. Fine. So, yeah, I threw secret stump out there because it's what I use all the time. I guess. So when you say you've signatured it, okay. It's going to depend on what it is you're alerting on. So when I'm running secret stump, I'm not actually running it inside the client domain. I'll usually be running it on my Linux workstation and I'm proxying the traffic through. So if you're detecting secret stump itself, that's not going to be an issue. If there's something about the way secret stump is talking to the DC, yeah, I'd have to look into that. I don't have a good answer for that off the top of my head. Not off the top of my head. We do have a repository of tips and tricks back at the office that we can look through, and obviously I can talk to the rest of my coworkers and other places. But I'll be perfectly honest, I did not sleep well last night, so recalling things off the top of my head's a little tough at the moment. Yeah, oh, absolutely. Hit me up and I can try and get you an answer. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Confluence, Confluence I've encountered before. I haven't had the opportunity to try and build anything for the API and whatnot. I need to set up a lab and see if I can, get a test instance going for that. Nothing specific. Shares are good because they're sort of the lowest common denominator. You're going to find them everywhere. So no, there's plenty of other things out there to look at. They're just a little more specific. So, hey, anyone else? Yes, sir. I have not found mistakes recently, I have not been in an environment that has been as jacked up as the one I described. That was one where I was there for something else while someone else was doing a pen test, and I saw all the alerts coming into their SOC, and I saw them rolling their eyes like, he doesn't get it. He's already owned everything. Why doesn't he stop? But I personally have not been in an environment where they left the keys to the password vault hanging out somewhere. So, but it is something to be aware of. Yes, in the back. That's a very wide open question. I mean, the question is protecting yourself from what precisely? Sorry, ACLs or hackers? Okay. Discord itself is not particularly, more or less dangerous than a lot of other places online. I guess it would. People can share stuff to there. People can share stuff to a lot of places. That's, you may want to look at like some sort of DLP solution for that, but I don't have any specific recommendations for, dealing with Discord securely. So, yes, sir. Sorry, one more time. Primarily Linux environments. A lot of these things are going to apply. You can use host-based firewalls on Linux. You'll just be using IP tables or UFW. You're still going to want to lock down any shares, whether that's SMB or NFS. Password management. You're probably not going to be dumping ntds.dit in that case. But you can, if you want to take a look at your centrally managed password file or however you're managing passwords that way. But these concepts can be adapted to a Linux environment. Yes. Let's see. Practice, CTFs are good, but also don't necessarily look at going directly into security. Start as a sysadmin, because basically, in a lot of ways, pen testers are just malicious sysadmins, or sysadmins who are, they know what the easy and quick way is to get something done that's probably going to break something else, but we want to get out by 5. So no, get familiar with the systems. It's the whole, don't break the rules until you know the rules. Learn how the systems work, and that will also teach you how to break them. So, anyone else? Yes. Yep, that's another one. Yeah, so basically for ECS1 in particular, turn off the ability to specify a subject alternate name. That will block that particular attack, yeah. All right, seeing no other hands. If anyone wants stickers or anything like that, I've got plenty of stickers. Come see me after the talk. And I'd like to thank you all for being here. I'd like to thank BSidesCharm for letting me speak. You all enjoy the rest of your day, weekend.